Hey, what's up everyone? Raging Golden Eagle here, having way too much fun as always. And I gotta say, one of the best parts of the internet, if not the best part, is that it is in the process of completely dismantling so many gatekeepers it's not even funny. And this applies to just about any industry you can think of. Let's look at, say, the news for instance, or information in general. It used to be you relied on the mainstream media to get your information. Unless you were physically at the site of some major event as it was going down, or were in communication with someone who was, about your only option to get information on what is going down is through the mainstream media. And this doesn't just apply to world events, this applies to lesser things like, say, gaming news. Just like before, unless you were there yourself or had an insider, you really had no way of knowing what other countries' game industries were doing, or hell, even your own for that matter. You didn't know what games were being made overseas, let alone which ones you're going to be getting and what the censorship is going to be once you got them. Whether or not you knew this information was all up to the discretion of the gatekeepers. And same thing when it comes to buying these products. If you wanted to buy product directly from Japan, you couldn't do it without one of your own insiders or via some specialized import-export company. But now, thanks to the glory of the internet, all of these gatekeepers are finally falling. Just think of how many times the mainstream media has been caught lying just over the past few days. They've been trying to pin the label of fake news on the alternative media for years now, and finally that label has stuck, except after it boomeranged back at them. It's getting pretty hard for them to lie and maintain their narratives when everyone on the internet has access to exactly what's going on the ground. All it takes is for one person with a camera and the capability to live stream and upload directly to the internet on the scene to completely disprove whatever narrative they're trying to push. And the game journalists too, we used to actually rely on them to kind of be the PR arm of the game industry. People like to throw that around as if it was an insult, but honestly that's pretty much what they were at first. And it was kind of a necessity because how else were we going to learn about this stuff before the internet? But now just about every single company out there has their own social media in one form or another, or their own blog, their own website you can visit. Even if they're one of the few companies that don't communicate in English in some way, browsers such as Google Chrome let you translate. Yeah, it's not going to be good, but it'll be good enough for you to get the general point. We don't need the middlemen anymore. And the same thing when it comes to purchasing these products. The number of companies that make their websites international friendly and are willing to ship internationally is exploding exponentially. Dedicated importers and exporters are kind of finding themselves between a rock and a hard place here. Some of them are smart though, like the Dollhouse for instance. Phil, the guy who runs that company, he understands that what he has to offer is customer service. So you gotta make that service worth the little bit of a markup, right? But a lot of these companies out there, they don't get that. And that's why they're failing. But either way, all of that massive setup aside and me just rambling was to, well, set this point up. With the advent of the internet and mainstream adoption of it, these gatekeepers went from all-powerful to unnecessary practically overnight. And they are not going to take this lying down. You bet they're gonna fight tooth and nail to maintain what little power they have left. You could kind of compare them to the mafias that were made extremely powerful during Prohibition here in America. These gatekeepers are not gonna go away just because their main reason for existing in the first place is gone. They are already giant, powerful entities. They are their own entities now. They will fight for their survival. It's the same shit as professional victims always needing to create more problems to be victimized by. Or pretty much any other community that revolves around having some enemy to fight. Once that enemy is finally defeated, then what? You think all these people making massive amounts of money at the top of these power structures that were created are just gonna let it go? No, at that point, you gotta move the goalpost. That's why professional victims are always looking for something to be victimized by. They know they're going to lose all of their sympathy funding if they flat out come out and say it's like, yeah, we defeated our enemy, so the fight's over, let's just go home. But anyway, here's the real funny part though. Well, funny though it is exceptionally good for people like us. If you truly look at it, the flow of information or physical goods or anything else that you can think of that actually changes hands, that has gotten out of the hands of the gatekeepers flowing in both directions. So what do I mean by this? If you look at the behavior of a lot of companies out there, they generally try their best to suck the dicks of governments and civilian organizations that are viewed as having a lot of power and influence. For example, alleged journalists, religious organizations, parent organizations, things like that. Basically, people with nothing better to do that tend to whine really loudly. Previously, these companies had no easy way to get in contact with their actual fan base. The only indication they had of what we might be thinking is what these whiny, loud individuals and organizations were saying. We can kind of see this in gaming right now. For the longest time, Japanese developers actually took what American games quote-unquote journalists were saying seriously, because that's the only window they had to us, their audience. Though they are slowly starting to come around, thank God. Because as I mentioned already, the internet goes both ways. Just as we can skip the middleman to go directly to the source to buy the stuff that we want, these companies can skip the middleman and go directly to us, the fans, to find out exactly what we want them to make. Previously, all they had to go on was the word of the middleman. If they release some product that we really want, but in the process of localization, the middleman completely butchered it and as a result nobody bought it, the middleman could just tell them, like, oh, there's no audience on this side of the ocean for that kind of content, so don't bother with it anymore. Now they get to hear the truth. That we actually want that content, just not the butchery that the middleman did to it. This process is getting started and it's going to take a lot more time, but more and more of these companies are starting to wake up to that fact. All these middlemen who claimed to speak for us in the past don't actually speak for us, they speak for themselves. They're not acting in our best interests, they're acting in their best interests. We just need to continue demonstrating to these companies that all of these groups, minus the government unfortunately, don't have any real power and are just a loud, whiny minority. And those that like money will listen and come around. Though funny enough, speaking of the government, the same thing works with them actually, funny enough. Just look back at the election of President Donald Trump. Damn, I love saying that because I know it triggers some of these people. Quite a bit of the people in positions of power believed the lie that there was no way he could win. Hitler had it in the bag. Nobody would be dumb enough to vote for Trump. He's just a clown. He's not a serious candidate at all. They listened to the loud, whiny, and bullying minority, despite being reminded more than a few times of the silent majority that is actually even more silent than usual this time around, because they are afraid of getting their lives destroyed by actually admitting that they are going to vote for Trump. So sure enough, when the election happened and reality cocksmacked these Mapoles types across the face, we were the only ones who weren't surprised by what happened. So please, companies and governments and whoever out there, learn your lesson already. How many more of you are going to have to learn this the hard way? These loud, whiny middlemen don't speak for us. Only we speak for ourselves. And more importantly, we let our wallets do the talking. And our votes when it comes to the government. So you guys would be best served by doing exactly what we've been doing in exponentially growing numbers over the years. And just completely remove the middlemen out of the equation entirely. The time of the gatekeepers is over. They're a dinosaur that's going to be dead in a few years if all goes well. So yeah, in closing, keep up the fight. As is the case, funny enough, with most of the fights we are fighting, we are already winning. All we have to do is make sure we don't screw up before the enemy's time runs out. That's all I gotta say, guys. Thanks for listening.